Today, my friends, we're going to talk about one of the most complex characters who has ever suffered in the world of anime and manga. A legendary figure who is shattered and destroyed in the most brutal ways. And yet, he's still standing, still fighting, still pushing forward. Guts, the hero who has never known the meaning of happiness. From the very first breath he took, Guts wasn't born like any ordinary human. This child came into the world from the corpse of his dead mother, her body hanging, from a noose rotting, swaying in the midst of a blood-soaked battlefield. Imagine, the very first sight he ever saw in his life was the torn corpse of his mother. The first place he ever slept was beneath her body, in the mud and blood. A mercenary leader named Gambino found the baby discarded there and raised him inside the mercenary camp. But that camp was no home. It was a hell forged of swords, a place where mercy didn't exist. It was a world where a child would learn to kill before he ever learned to walk. Shisu, Gambino's wife, tried to hold him, to give him a mother's touch and warmth. But like everything good in Guts' life, it ended too soon. She died, the closest person he had, the only one he saw as a mother. That was when the real nightmare began. Gambino, the man who should have been a father, became his tormentor. He used the boy as a tool, threw him into battles, and when Guts grew older, he sold him for money to another mercenary, forcing him into unspeakable abuse, robbing him of his innocence. From that moment on, Guts learned the single rule that would define his life: if I don't kill, I'll die. And if I trust anyone, they'll abandon me. Guts grew up inside the camp, and with each passing day he felt that the sword wasn't just a weapon, it was his very life. Deep down, despite all the cruelty, he still looked at Gambino as a father, the man who raised him. One night, as Guts sat thinking about how he could repay the man who had given him shelter, Gambino entered, sword in hand, his eyes filled with malice. The eyes of someone who had decided to cast off a heavy burden. Gambino exploded in rage, screaming at Guts, blaming him for his severed leg, blaming him for the death of his wife Shisu, accusations that had nothing to do with him. But in Gambino's eyes, Guts was a curse that had ruined his life. The boy who had been searching for a father to embrace him discovered that the closest person to him had betrayed him, had sold him to Donovan to be exploited, leaving scars that broke him from the inside out. That night, true hatred was born in Guts' heart. He stood before Gambino and without hesitation drove his sword into his body. A scream of rage, of betrayal, filled the air. And the blood that spilled was a declaration that there was no turning back. In that moment, the child died, and the beast was born. Guts fled from the camp, the night covering his footsteps, carrying the weight of the world against him after killing Gambino. Alone, just a boy still in his teens, he wandered, dragging a sword larger than his own body. From one battlefield to another, he sold his soul to the highest bidder. This life taught him another lesson. The world holds no friendship, no family. All that exists is your sword, and the enemy standing before you. Hunt or be hunted. On the battlefield, people began to see something different in him. Not just a boy fighting, but a cold-blooded warrior who could stand against dozens of soldiers without taking a single step back. The mercenaries called him the 100-man slayer, but the truth inside him was different. He didn't feel strong, he felt empty. Every strike he delivered was an attempt to bury his past. Every corpse that fell beneath him was his heart screaming, I will never be a victim again, even if it meant living alone forever. For years he carried on like this, until he encountered something that would change his fate forever. The Band of the Hawk. It was the first time he saw their leader, Griffith. On a battlefield clouded with blood and dust, Guts watched as an army unlike any he'd ever faced appeared before him. Soldiers who moved with discipline, their eyes locked on the same purpose, and at their center stood a calm, enigmatic man, Griffith. The clash between them was fierce. Guts's massive blade cut through Hawk's soldiers one after another, but Griffith was different. His calmness, his mysterious smile, his graceful yet deadly style, all of it made Guts feel, for the first time, that he had found a rival unlike any he had ever faced. Griffith defeated him not with brute force, but with intellect and cunning. From that moment, the lone wolf became part of a pack. For the first time, Guts wasn't fighting just to survive. He was fighting alongside people he could finally call comrades. Among them was Casca, a warrior who at first saw Guts as a threat to her leader. But over time, she opened her heart to him, slowly becoming the closest person to him. And with every battle they fought side by side, Guts felt something he had never known before, belonging. Yet, beneath it all, a question lingered in his soul. Am I nothing more than a tool in Griffith's hand? Or do I truly deserve to be free? Griffith built his ambition step by step, not only through battles but through political schemes. In a fateful moment, he entrusted Guts with a mission that would change everything: the assassination of Julius, a noble of the kingdom who despised Griffith and wanted him destroyed. That night, Guts slipped into the castle like a shadow moving through the guards. With a single stroke of his sword, Julius fell. The mission was a success. But suddenly, the door creaked open. Standing there was his young son, Adonis. The boy froze, his wide eyes staring, seeing the blood, the sword, and the killer before him. In a primal, instinctive reaction, Guts raised his blade and struck. The child fell silently, blood spilling from his chest. In that moment, Guts felt the weight of his sword for the first time. He hadn't just cut down an enemy, he had ended an innocent life. That night carved a wound deeper than any scar on his body, and from then on he understood his sword wasn't just a tool of survival. It could also take the lives of the blameless and leave behind a scream inside him that would never be silenced. With every victory the band of the Hawk achieved, Griffith's stature grew. Kings and nobles alike began to see him as a great commander, but inside, Guts was fighting another war. Each time he looked into Griffith's eyes, he felt like nothing more than a sword moved by his command. While everyone else saw Griffith as angelic, Guts searched for his own purpose within the emptiness consuming him. On a quiet night, Guts made the hardest decision of his life. He declared, "And I don't want to live as anyone's shadow, not even Griffith's." He decided to leave the Hawks and walk his own path of freedom. The departure wasn't easy. Casca was shocked. Griffith erupted with fury. He stood before Guts, challenging him to stay. He wanted to force him to continue. Their duel was swift, and its outcome even swifter. Guts triumphed, then walked away in silence without saying goodbye. His footsteps carried him far from his brothers in arms, though his heart was still tied to them. But what he didn't know was that his departure would destroy everything. From that moment, Griffith began to unravel. The emptiness left behind by Guts pulled him into madness and dragged him toward a dark path, the path that would end in an eclipse. After Guts' departure, Griffith broke from within. The leader who once seemed as unshakable as stone suddenly became hollow, fragile. His dreams and ambitions now seemed threatened with collapse. The sword he once relied on most had abandoned him at his weakest moment. In desperation, Griffith sought to fill the void. He crept into Princess Charlotte's chambers and began a forbidden affair with her. But the kingdom did not forgive. His betrayal and his secret relationship were exposed. He was captured and thrown into a dark dungeon. But this was no prison. It was hell. They tortured him, shattered his body, disfigured his features, destroyed his tendons and bones, until he was nothing more than the husk of a man, left with nothing inside but endless pain. During that time, with their leader gone, the band of the Hawk collapsed. They were hunted down by armies, scattered and broken. Every dream they had built crumbled to dust. Until one day, Guts returned and found a nightmare waiting for him. The band of the Hawk, once his home, had become ruins, and Griffith, the man they saw as an angel, had been reduced to a broken corpse of a human being. But the true tragedy hadn't even begun yet. On the horizon loomed a terrifying legendary event, the eclipse. On a mysterious night, the sky turned crimson, the earth split apart, and the world itself was overturned. Guts came back to save Griffith, but what awaited him was hell itself. The ground became a living nightmare, an endless landscape of flesh and blood. Thousands of demonic creatures swarmed around the Hawks. His comrades, his brothers and family, were each dragged away, torn apart, devoured alive before his eyes. Their screams pierced straight into his soul. Amid the massacre, monstrous godlike entities appeared, beings of terrifying power beyond human comprehension. They made Griffith an offer: unsacrifice everyone you love, and we will grant you the power of a king. You will rise above mankind and rule the world. In a moment between madness and despair, Griffith accepted. The pendant he carried transformed, swallowed him whole, and from the depths of blood and agony, a new demon was born. Guts, chained and powerless, could only watch. There was no escape. In front of him, the one person he loved most, Casca, was handed over. To Griffith himself, his closest friend, now turned into a monster. Before Guts' eyes, Griffith took her and violated her in the most horrific way imaginable. Guts screamed, his eyes burning with fury, his body bursting with pain so raw it felt like it would tear him apart. He thrashed, bit down on his own arm, blood pouring from his mouth, trying to tear himself free of the chains. His screams shook the very air until his arm was severed in his frenzy. In the chaos, one of the demons drove its talon into his eye. Darkness swallowed his vision as blood poured down his face, while the only woman he had ever truly loved was defiled before him. That was the moment the bond swordsman was born, not Guts the human, but Guts the beast, ready to erase everything in his path. Amid the hell that consumed Guts, when everything was collapsing around him, a mysterious figure appeared, the tall knight. The knight intervened, snatching Guts and Casca out from the heart of the massacre and casting them far away from the demon's fangs. Guts emerged from the eclipse alive, but not the same. His arm was gone, his right eye lost, his body covered in scars. Yet the physical pain was nothing compared to the wound carved into his soul, watching all, his comrades butchered before his eyes, and seeing the woman he loved most violated. From that night onward, a strange mark appeared on his neck, the brand of sacrifice. That mark cursed him, drawing demons and monsters to him day and night. There was no escape. Hell was no longer just a memory. Hell became his reality. But the cruelest blow was Casca. The girl who had been his only love broke. Her mind shattered from the horror she had endured. She forgot Guts. She forgot herself. She became like a lost child, terrified of everything, even him. And from here, a new era began. Guts was no longer just a warrior. He became a phantom walking the earth carrying a massive sword, and behind his single eye burned a rage that would never be extinguished. Before the eclipse, Casca had been pregnant with Guts' child, a fragile hope, a chance at a new life away from blood and steel. But after what happened, after her violation at the hands of Femto, Griffith, the unborn child was corrupted. It was born as something unnatural, half human, half demon, a creature that was neither one nor the other. That child became nothing more than a symbol of the curse. Not just because it was twisted in form, but because it would appear and vanish before Guts and Casca like a ghost haunting them. Sometimes its face seemed innocent. Other times, so terrifying it could frighten even demons. The greatest tragedy of all was that this child's body was later taken, used as the vessel to return Griffith to the mortal world. In other words, Guts' own blood, his own son, became the shell through which his eternal enemy was reborn. Imagine it. Your enemy not only betrays you, not only strips you of everything you love, but rises again into the world, wearing the body of your child. After the eclipse, Guts walked only one path: vengeance. He was hunted relentlessly by creatures who had sold their souls to darkness in exchange for demonic power. Each one was a monstrous, nightmarish being beyond human, and yet Guts stood against them, wielding his massive black sword, the Dragon Slayer, a blade larger than himself, heavy enough to crush, sharp enough to rip through the flesh of monsters with a single swing. As if they were made of paper, every battle left Guts with new scars on his body and on his soul. In one horrific fight, he faced orphaned children who had been twisted into undead husks under the control of a demonic spirit. Their eyes still looked innocent, but their bodies attacked him with the ferocity of wild beasts. Before him lay the hardest choice: let them kill him or cut them down. With tears of pity and guilt burning inside, Guts raised his sword and struck them down, one after another. Blood spilled from children's bodies, and in each of their faces, Guts saw himself as a boy. That moment carved a cruel truth into him, and he am condemned to live in endless torment. And from the shadows, the Skull Knight always appeared, whispering to him of fate, of the deeper hell still awaiting him. But Guts refused to surrender. He decided that even if his path was drenched in blood, he would keep fighting, because all he had left was his sword. Years passed in his hunt for demons until one day Guts fell into the hands of a fanatical religious sect known as the austerity. To them, Guts wasn't just a warrior, he was possessed, a heretic who had to be purified by fire and blood. Their leader was Farnese, a strange woman, consumed by religion and sadism in terrifying measure. She ordered Guts to be chained, imprisoned, and tortured. They bound him in iron, scourged him with whips, lit fires around him, waiting to see him break, to see him scream, beg, collapse. But Guts stood like a mountain. His eyes, one blinded, one burning, were filled only with focus and unshakable resolve. Every lash, every strike rang across his body, but he never cried out. He endured hell as if it were part of his existence. In the end, it was Farnese who broke. She had seen him as a demon, yet what stood before her was a man more stubborn, more unyielding than anything she had ever imagined. A man defying fire, blood, and fate itself, refusing to fall. After his torment at the hands of the Holy See, Guts managed to escape. He returned to search for the only piece of his past that still remained, Casca. But the woman he found was not the Casca he had loved. She was only a shadow of herself, her mind shattered from what she endured on the night of the eclipse. Even so, Guts swore to protect her. He built her a small shelter, far away from war and demons, guarding her as if she were the last fragment of his humanity. But peace could never last in Guts' life. On a dark night, at the graves of the old band of the Hawk, a figure appeared before him. Griffith. Not the Griffith he once knew, but the new Griffith, reborn to a perfect human body. His features calm, his smile cold. Standing among the graves of those he had sacrificed in the eclipse, Griffith spoke with chilling detachment, and this is the most fitting place for the Hawk to be reborn. The shock struck Guts like lightning. The man who had once been his friend, the one he had entrusted everything to, the one who had destroyed his life, had returned stronger than ever before. Against the power of this new Griffith and his army of monstrous apostles, Guts would need a strength far beyond anything he had ever known. In a battle against a monstrous giant called Grunbeld, no sword and no human strength were enough to bring him down. And that was when the Berserker armor appeared, an ancient cursed black armor. The moment a warrior wears it, it unleashes all the rage and savagery buried within. The armor grants inhuman power, allowing its bearer to fight like a mythical beast, but the price is hell itself. It binds the warrior's flesh with iron, forcing his broken bones to move, driving his body onward even as it shatters. It erases pain, not through healing, but through madness. It drowns the soul in blood and strips away fear, but at the cost of tearing away humanity. When Guts first donned it, he became something no longer human. His strikes thundered like storms, his lone eye glowed like a pale moon, and his voice roared like a beast from the pits of hell. Enemies were slaughtered, but his own comrades recoiled in terror. Even Casca was threatened, not by the world outside, but by the beast of darkness rising within him. Guts now walked the razor's edge of sanity. The armor made him stronger, faster, unstoppable. But the rage inside him became a raging storm. So much so that at times, when he looked at Casca, he didn't see the woman he loved. He saw prey. In a moment of complete collapse, while under the control of the darkness within him, Guts nearly lost himself entirely. That night, Casca broke his heart more than any wound on his body ever could, not just because he had hurt her, but because he realized the true monster he was fighting was not outside, it was inside him. Guilt began to consume him. He started hating himself as fiercely as he hated Griffith. And yet, in the midst of that despair, he began to strive for change. He struggled to improve, to become the hero Casca needed, the man who could help her stand on her feet again and fight the monsters that threatened them. The Berserk manga is still ongoing, and Guts continues his journey through suffering and pain. His story is not just one of blood and battles, it is also a philosophical journey. Guts himself embodies the idea of human will, showing how one can resist the world even when everything is against them. The author, Kentaro Miura, drew heavily from Nietzsche's philosophy, the human will, the strength of humanity, the need to break free from constraints and live freely, beyond society's illusions. One of Nietzsche's most famous ideas is reflected in Guts and He Who Fights. Monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster himself. It's as if that sentence were written across Guts' forehead. He fights demons day and night, yet in every battle he fears the monster inside him will consume him. The entire manga revolves around one central question: does a human truly have freedom, or are we merely tools manipulated by others? Guts' answer is clear. Even if you are weak, even if your fate is already written, you must strive, you must endure. And that is what makes Guts not just a symbol of blood and violence, but of iron will, a hero who creates meaning in his life, even in the midst of hell. The mangaka wasn't just drawing an ordinary manga. Every page of Berserk was a complete work of art. His attention to detail reached the level of obsession. You could see the texture of metal on the swords, the dust of battle, even the terrified breaths in the soldiers' eyes. The backgrounds weren't mere decoration. They were part of the story. Mountains, forests, castles, all layered with symbolism. You could feel the entire world as a living, dark entity breathing before you. Guts' battles against monsters were drawn like moving nightmares, twisted, malformed bodies, rivers of blood flowing like an ocean. Yet amid all this chaos, there were moments of silence, Guts holding his sword, his gaze filled with both determination and sorrow. The author didn't use these details just to impress the reader. He wanted you to feel everything. The pain of a wound, the scream of a dying friend, the darkness inside Guts himself. Perhaps that's why the manga progressed so slowly, but in itself, it became one of the most famous and best mangas you could ever read. Guts was not just a character in a story, he became a symbol that reshaped the entire industry. Before Berserk, heroes in manga were idealized, brave, just, defending what was right. But Guts broke that rule. He is an anti-hero, a bloody killer filled with hatred and vengeance. He doesn't fight for justice, he fights for survival, for his freedom, and for revenge against himself before the evil that stands before him. This made him far closer to reality, because humans are not angels, they are full of contradictions. The manga introduced a new type of fantasy to Japan, a dark fantasy, a genre more common in Western literature. Kentaro Miura brought it to Japanese manga, creating a dark, bloody, and psychologically complex world. Guts himself has inspired hundreds of works, from character designs in games like Ark Souls and Elden Ring, to entire manga series that drew from his strength, madness, and internal struggle. But most importantly, Guts touched readers on a deep level. Every time we see him defeated, tortured, broken, and shattered, and then rise again, sword in, hand against the monsters, we learn that even in the darkest points of life, a human can resist. Guts will never be free from his wounds, but he chooses to live with them, to fight with them. That is what makes him an epic, unforgettable character. In the end, Guts teaches us, a person is defined not by what they have lost, but by what they have endured and resisted. And that's where Guts' story ends. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you stayed until the end and watched the whole video, I hope you'll give it a like. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video and liked the content.